Today we're going to talk about something the West is no longer hiding, the real possibility that Vladimir Putin may be ill, and that Russia could be entering unknown territory. No, this isn't clickbait. No, it's not a conspiracy theory. It's pure geopolitics. And I'll tell you this, if Putin is perfectly healthy, good for him, but it doesn't explain why the West is so tense. Besides, if Putin was sending signals of physical fragility, it would be the first time the Kremlin didn't try to Photoshop him back to looking like it's 2004. Officially, Putin is healthy as an oak tree. That's what the Kremlin says. But his on-camera behavior doesn't exactly say the same thing. Let's go with what's tangible, what you can actually see. Because there are no medical documents, but signs, there are several. Reduced public appearances. Before, we saw him at every event. Now he shows up in only edit when strictly necessary mode. Hand tremors and tense grips. In several videos, you can see his fingers pressing hard against the table, as if he were trying to stop the camera from catching something else. Facial swelling and irregular mobility. Short steps, rigid posture, difficulty turning his body and neck naturally. Suspicious cuts and edits in official videos. Weird jumps, mismatched shots, changing shadows. The Kremlin has been editing for years, but lately it looks like it's being done by a rushed intern. I mean, when a leader appears on video as if he's been recorded with maximum stabilization filter, something is going on. It's like when your webcam freezes on Zoom and everyone knows it's not your internet, it's your 2012 laptop. Now, careful, all of this is evidence, not diagnosis. Rumors range from cancer to Parkinson's, all the way to wilder theories than TikTok on a Sunday. But the truth is, there are enough signs for governments to pay attention. No one in the West can confirm his condition, but they also can't ignore the amount of clues appearing on camera. Now, the key question, why on earth would the West need to prepare for Putin's death? Are they expecting Russia to shatter like a Chinese vase? Well, here's the core of it. This isn't only about Putin's health, but about what would happen if something changes. The West isn't speculating for fun, this is strategic reality. Let's look at it. The Putin system is not just Putin. Putin isn't simply a president, he represents a highly personalist authoritarian system. According to analysts, his power is so concentrated that his eventual absence could create a very deep vacuum. Experts at SCEUS warn that Putinism could have a serious succession problem because there are no guarantees that the rules he enforces would be respected if he disappears, and the regime could fragment. Also, the war in Ukraine amplifies this fragility. A defeat, an economic crisis or sustained military pressure could erode his legitimacy, according to the same SCEUS report. Let's consider some serious scenarios described by expert groups, like the Atlantic Council. In its Russia Tomorrow report, the Atlantic Council identifies 5 possible scenarios for Russia after Putin, among them, a technocratic regime, a nationalist government, even fragmentation of the country. For example, one scenario is a technocratic reset, new leadership that is more technocratic, less charismatic, but organized enough to try reforming something without fully breaking from the regime's machinery. A more extreme scenario is the fracture of the Russian state. Regional factions might gain influence, central power would weaken, and the West would have to deal with a very different geopolitical Russia. So, what are the risks and opportunities for the West? If the transition is chaotic, there could be internal struggles between Kremlin factions, causing military and political instability. In that scenario, the risk isn't only internal. If Russia fractures, the proliferation or access to strategic resources, like its arsenal, could become insecure. Also, without proper planning, the West could be caught without a clear strategy to respond to new leaders or emerging realities. According to Rand, Putin's death will not automatically make Russia less dangerous. Not everything would be negative. The transition could open space for more pragmatic leaders or technocrats seeking to reopen diplomatic channels with the West. Rand suggests that Western governments should prepare for different scenarios, not only the worst, using scenario analysis to anticipate risks and also potential openings. If the West coordinates well, it could leverage a transition to negotiate reforms, de-escalate tensions and even rebuild certain ties with Russia. In other words, Putin's health is not just a medical issue, it's a global security issue. The West must not only fear collapse but also see a transition as a strategic window. And if it doesn't prepare, it could lose both risk and opportunity. Putin is not just a president, he is the system. He controls the elite, the military apparatus, foreign policy, and internal narratives. He's been in power for more than 20 years and has not openly prepared any successors. That means when he's gone, whether by illness, retirement or death, Russia enters full uncertainty mode. It's like removing the central Jenga block, but with nuclear weapons. In other words, Putin's health is not just a medical issue, it's a global security matter. The West must not only fear collapse but recognize a transition as a strategic window. And if it doesn't prepare, it risks losing both safety and opportunity. The West must begin planning for a strategic transition. It's not enough to wait for Putin to go away, because the Kremlin's power system is deeply personalized and its elites may react unpredictably when he disappears. The West cannot afford passive waiting. Preparing means anticipating every possible scenario and designing clear strategic plans to reduce risks and seize opportunities if an unexpected power shift happens. Now we get to the practical part. What can the West do while Putin is still around, or while preparing for his possible exit? Because let's be honest, waiting for something to change on its own is like putting coffee on the table and waiting for it to brew itself. Here's what comes to mind: strategic preparation, meaning scenario planning. Western governments and alliances should anticipate everything from an orderly succession to a chaotic transition. Rand recommends simulation exercises, wargaming, to assess risks and opportunities. Intelligence on the Russian elite, monitoring movements inside the Kremlin and military to detect early signs of shifts or fractures. This isn't Hollywood espionage, it's preventive politics. Transatlantic coordination, strengthening unity within NATO and European allies so decisions are fast and aligned. Active diplomacy, keeping channels open even in tense moments. Preparing to negotiate with new leaders or technocrats who may emerge after Putin. Designing communication strategies to avoid misunderstandings or unexpected escalations. But so far they've handled it terribly with the war in Ukraine and the torture of Jehovah's Witnesses, ignoring ultimatums from major nations like the United States, the UK and Germany, and disregarding what ordinary Russians want, even condemning some as rebels and enemies of the state. For internal preparation, logically they should review and update defense plans in sensitive borders like Ukraine and the Baltic states. Design sanction packages and economic responses ready for rapid deployment. Evaluate risks of disinformation and cyber operations that may intensify during a transitional period. In short, the West cannot just sit back while Russia plays Jenga with its leaders. Better to have the rescue plan ready before the tower starts wobbling. Preparing isn't wishing anyone's death, although if you ask me, there is serious evidence that Putin could be responsible for crimes against humanity, such as the forced transfer of Ukrainian civilians and torture, according to reports from the UN and the Council of Europe, and justice demands those acts stop. However, as long as he remains in power, he faces major legal barriers to an international trial, so he has not yet been fully prosecuted. The point is, the West prepares because anything could happen, and that is called strategic intelligence. Because when such a central player starts to wobble, whatever comes next can change everything. Scenario 1, the most optimistic, an orderly succession. Putin leaves power, someone trustworthy takes his place, and everything continues more or less the same. The typical candidate would be a technocrat or a member of the security circle. They would continue the war in Ukraine, and the West would have to negotiate with someone new, but with the same doctrine. Let's say it would be a change of president, but not a change of geopolitical personality. A Putin 2.0 with a different name. Scenario 2, the one the West fears most, a chaotic transition. Imagine Putin disappearing from the political scene without defining a successor. This isn't just changing bosses, it's an earthquake shaking the entire structure of Russian power. What could happen? Internal struggles, different Kremlin factions, military, political hardliners, compete for control. Regional power fragmentation, governors and local leaders could use the uncertainty to expand their influence. Military risks, impulsive or poorly coordinated decisions could increase the danger of local or international conflicts. Economic instability, markets and sanctions could react abruptly, affecting Russia and its commercial partners. A chaotic transition means the West would need to respond quickly, with reliable information and contingency plans. Coordination among allies would be essential to avoid hasty decisions that could make the situation worse. It's like watching a political Jenga game. If you pull the wrong block without a plan B, the tower can fall on your own feet. In summary, a chaotic transition is not impossible, and the West must be prepared. There are no movie heroes or villains here, Just strategy, risk, and many pieces that could move at once. This would generate power struggles, fragmentation of alliances inside the Kremlin, increased military risk due to unpredictability, possible internal destabilization inside Russia. This scenario is scary. Russia without a clear power center is like leaving a truck without brakes on a downhill slope. Scenario 3, Putin remains in power, but no longer controls things as before. A weakened commander can be more dangerous than a strong one. Imagine an aging psychopath, with slower reflexes, an ego that can't tolerate the shadow of defeat, and paranoia growing by the minute. That is not a leader. That is danger in slow motion. What does a weakened Putin imply? More impulsive decisions. The mix of paranoia, fear of losing power and bad information can lead to disastrous errors. Greater internal repression, because the psychopath who fears losing everything tightens the screws until everyone shakes. Tensions within the inner circle. Loyalists who once obeyed blindly may start making moves, conspiring, or simply waiting for the roller coaster to end. Consequences for the West. A weakened leader can be more unpredictable than a strong one. Sanctions, threats, traditional diplomacy, all could trigger absurd or extreme reactions. Sure, they're probably getting ready with surveillance, intelligence, international coordination, and maybe a couple of umbrellas for the political storm. So, West, take note. A weakened Putin is not a gift. He's a psychopath with bad coffee, bad mood and too much power. And believe me, that's more terrifying than a chaotic scenario, because you never know which buttons he's going to press. It's like James Bond facing a villain who has lost half his gadgets and his memory, but still insists on yelling, shaken, not stirred, while pressing random buttons. Dangerous, unpredictable, and slightly ridiculous. So what does the phrase, "the West must prepare for Putin's death," actually mean? It's not a wish. It's not a threat. It's not a prediction. It's a strategic reminder. It means, prepare for any transition. Anticipate possible internal crises in Russia. Protect the European flank. Avoid diplomatic vacuums. Have ready-to-go responses for political collapse. Translated into everyday language. Don't wait for something to explode before looking for a fire extinguisher. Putin is a central actor on the world stage. If his health is truly deteriorating, we are facing a historic moment. And if not, well, he won't live forever. Change will come sooner or later. For now, the only eternal things are the Kremlin's mystery, and the photos of Putin riding a horse shirtless. If you enjoy these unfiltered analyses, with clear data and a touch of irony to survive the world, subscribe right now. You won't want to miss what's coming, because believe me, Geopolitics is not planning to take a vacation. And tell me in the comments, do you think the West really needs to prepare for a world without Putin, or is this all media noise? I'm reading you below. I'm Oliver. Thanks for watching. See you in the next report.